Alright then, an entertaining game, that one. Brora failing to win again though. What's that, 1 in 6?
1 in 6. In fairness, there's been a couple of draws in there, but the first thing I would say about that game is both teams and the referee Gordon Morrison deserve credit for getting that game on. I mean, like maybe a similar story across the north that I've heard over the weekend, but pitches were fine, and then late morning, lunchtime, there was a bit of a deluge. Brora, particular mention should go to a couple of their directors, Ali McKenzie and Kevin Monroe. They were out with the squeegees going over that sort of area, and as we saw on the camera, that area sort of in front of the away dugout down that side, and then also the penalty box to the right. They were going over them intensively before kick-off, and I mean both teams were willing to play, and Gordon Morrison, the referee, was willing to play as well, and I think, you know, we saw a decent game. The game got played, you know, fixture backlog's bad enough as it is just now, so it was good, I think, from everyone that they managed to get that game on, and despite the nature of the pitch, I thought both teams did pretty well and served up a decent contest. Yeah,
there was a touch of comedy cuts to a couple of the goals, though, wasn't there?
No, I don't think it was really down to the pitch. I mean, Brora's goal, there is when Kyle McLeod's header down, you know, if you're playing that game in August, the ball probably bounces a lot more because the pitch is firm, but the players just had to adjust to it, and that was it. And I think, to be honest, over the 90 minutes, the team that deserved to win did win, although Fraserburgh didn't have, you know, a huge amount of gilt-edged chances in the second half. It was sort of headers for corners and things like that. They were the team that did most of the probing and had most of the pressure, and you sort of felt as it went on, if somebody was going to win it, it was going to be them. And Sean Butcher is somebody, obviously, that great player. There's few better really to be able to take off the bench if you're needing a goal. He just, as Mark Cowie said, he has that knack, right place, right time to be there to score, and that was, we saw another example of it with his winning goal.
Yeah, swung his leg twice. Once in the back of the net with the ball, and next one to take the corner flag right out the ground.
Well, I was a bit disappointed seeing his celebration, because there was talk in the stand that he would be doing a darting celebration, because he's quite a keen darts player, Sean, but we didn't get that, or certainly we haven't seen it on the camera, but he took the corner flag out instead.
In terms of the result, discussed at the start, Brora just the 1 win in 6. Do you think the fixture backlogs just killed them, Brora?
I think it has had an effect in terms of they went from not playing much at all to they're now playing Saturday, Wednesday basically every week for the rest of the season. I mean, you looked, I say 6 weeks ago or whatever, at Brora's squad when they had everyone available, and you thought they had quite a deep squad, but now things have taken its toll. I mean, you look at Saturday, Colin Williamson, Mark Shewan both out, Alex Cooper out, Jordan McRae went off injured after 20 minutes with a dead leg. You know, Andy McRae hasn't kicked a ball there for a while. Even they had the likes of Lewis Hyde in on loan for Cali Thistle. He picked up an injury. Matthew Strachan was on loan for Cali Thistle. He's been recalled and now been loaned out to Nairn, so their squad is a bit thinner. And I think the thing is as well, it becomes hard because if you go back to before the sort of start of the recent run, they were very much in this sort of title mix, which is obviously a big incentive for everyone. But now that they've sort of, I would say they've slipped out of that realistically now, it probably becomes a bit more of a slog, and maybe the motivation and the intensity isn't quite as great. But in fairness to Ali McDonald, he wasn't using any of that as an excuse at all, and he says that they need to be better and they need to turn things around, and obviously with the games they've got coming up, that they could be back in good form quite quickly. And obviously the thing as well is the sides will meet again at the end of the month in the Highland League Cup final, and that's it's a big thing for both sides. But in terms of what I was saying with Brora, it's important for them that they do try and
something to play for, yeah,
rediscover form before they go into that final.
Comfortable in the end then for Huntly. Some great link up from their forward players in that one.
Aye, definitely. I mean, you see the sort of mix that they have with like Andy Hunter, Angus Grant, Robbie Foster, obviously scoring the hat-trick, had a very good day, and they remain the division's top goal scorer, 75 goals now they've scored in the Brechin Highland League, and on Saturday's evidence you can see why. I thought the difference between the sides was when Huntly got into good areas and had maybe their spells on top, they carved out really good chances and took 3 of them obviously, whereas the Forest Mechanics, this first half especially, I think they had some decent spells, but either the final shot or pass or cross let them down a wee bit, and that's maybe, again, does it come down to confidence a wee bit perhaps in terms of Forest, in the bottom half of the table and have found it hard at times to pick up results. Maybe that bit of confidence or belief in the final third is lacking. Also, I mean, even it comes down to maybe not having players like say an Andy Hunter who scored against them in the draw in midweek, like will score 20 goals a season, or even somebody like Robbie Foster, because when Huntly get into those good areas in the final third, they always look a threat.
What was your pick of the goals? I thought the first one, the finish
really good for the first one, I felt, but the second one as well was quite nice, but I think Forest will probably feel with probably the second, all 3 of them perhaps, that they could defend it better, but no, I thought they were all decent enough goals if you were watching that from a Huntly perspective, and it puts them now, well, at the moment they're sort of in that nice position trying to finish 6th. I know they've played more games, but like Turriff and Nairn both dropped points at the weekend, and Huntly won, so it was a good weekend for them on that side of things, and the victory as well means they've already surpassed last season's points total with 7 games to go, so it's it has been a good season for the Black and Golds.
How many goals do you think they can reach? Is it 75? Is the ton on? Or do they need a big one?
You're probably needing another 6 or 7 job to, I think, maybe to get to the ton. I suppose it's like 7 games, 25 goals. It's 3 and a bit a game. It's tons, maybe a tall order, but I think certainly up into the 90s they should be looking at.
If it weren't for Banks a day on 72 goals, they'd have some lead over the other side.
The caveat a wee bit is the likes of Bucky have also got a lot of games in hand, and we know they are capable of scoring a lot of goals.
Okay then, another entertaining clash, that one. I thought keeper's been rounded for fun in that game.
I suppose it's a tremendous game. I fit by that, I thought, on Friday. Really, I mean, they got a good. We've seen before. I mean, with other teams when they've done it as well in previous seasons, it's been sort of well attended. But Banks of Dee Friday night games, when they can get them, seem to work well, and they got a really good crowd. And a lot of Turriff fans there as well, which was good to see. Got a really good crowd, and they were treated to a tremendous game of football. Both teams played their part. I felt Turriff, to get 2-0 in front, they played well, and they looked quite comfortable actually at times, the way they were knocking the ball about. But then the first goal that they lose, I mean, Davy Day, before I go any further, Davy Day had an excellent game, and we saw some of the saves he's made in the highlights. I thought he was top class, but I do think he's at fault for the first Banks of Dee goal. It's one of them, easy to say after the event obviously, but if he stays back, then there's defenders covering that. It's probably not easy for Lachie McLeod to score. And after that goal went in, it was just like someone switched, really. Turriff never sort of regained the composure and control they had prior to that, and Banks of Dee seemed to go up through the gears, and they created a lot of chances either side of half time. And then just when you thought maybe the storm had been weathered and the game was petering out a wee bit, the second Banks of Dee goal, which again was unfortunate for Turriff, it was a back pass intercepted, that to make it 2-2 just sort of gave Banks of Dee fresh impetus again. They're pressing, and then they got that wee maybe bit of luck with the winner at the end with the deflection. But that's the sort of things you need when you're going for titles. But you can't just go on a little bit luck, because the way they came back and the sort of fight and the character they showed, that's the thing you need if you're trying to win leagues. And right now, obviously other sides of games in hand, but Banks of Dee are sitting top of the table and they're right in there.
Yeah, dare I say, early in the season, that might have been a game where Bank City drew.
Quite possibly, or even, I mean, we've seen some of the things, some of the games that have dropped points in earlier in the season where they were frustrated, and I think we would have been frustrated again if they'd say that had finished 2-2, given the chances they had. I think we would have been disappointed, but a good game to win, and I mean, still, draws have obviously hampered them a wee bit this season, but to have only lost one game in the league coming into March, that's an excellent record.
Yeah. Got to be said as well, Turriff competing well again against one of the league's big hitters nowadays.
Aye, I mean, Turriff were certainly for 35 minutes were very good, I thought, but as Warren Cummins sort of said afterwards, the need to learn from maybe how things panned out after losing the first goal, and he sort of touched upon their decision making in terms of maybe when to play and when not to play, and they did sort of play themselves into trouble at times, but I think with the players they've got, they will learn, and I mean, next season in games like that, potentially if they do learn, they could go on and win them. And I mean, the one good bit of news they had as well before the game was Liam Strachan and Murray Cormack signing contract extensions till the summer of 2026, and they've both sort of been mainstays for Turriff, so obviously good news that they're staying at the Hawks.
Okay, Wick Academy 3 for Martin United 1 is where we're going next. Now, this is another game where every effort was made to ensure the game could go ahead despite the wet weather, unlike Keith against Brechin City. Callum, let's discuss what happened there first.
In fairness, every effort by both clubs was made to ensure that Keith against Brechin City could go ahead, but I mean, that's ended up being a bit of a farce, and I mean, it's not often you end up in a situation where you have the two clubs issuing a joint statement on the Sunday and planning on making a complaint to the SFA refereeing department. Joel Kennedy was the referee who put the game off, and I wasn't there, and I wasn't on the pitch, so I'm going on what people have told me, but it's a situation again, like we touched on, there was the snow or sleet and then rain in the morning up to lunchtime. Clearly there'd been a wee issue with the Kynie Park pitch, but both sides felt it was playable, or they were willing to wait to do further work on it and kick off at say 4:30 when they felt in all likelihood it would have been playable. Now, if the referee feels at the back of two it's not playable and he doesn't feel comfortable playing it even though both sides want to, that's fair enough. But the thing that I find bizarre or interesting about the whole situation is sort of or certainly it seems anyway, the willingness to not wait to see what it might be like at 3:30 at 4 or whatever and get the game played, because I mean, Brechin were, both teams were there, both clubs wanted to play, they were doing their best. Like, I think that game could have potentially been played. I mean, some folks said to me the pitch was fine. I had somebody this morning actually say he felt the pitch was perhaps unsafe at the time, who was there at the time it was called off, but then I kind of feel like could they have waited? I mean, the conditions were improving all the time, they were working on the pitch, so we're going to put sand down, and that's why I think, going back to the Wick for Martin game, that was a really good example of everyone sort of working together to get that game on and get it played. I mean, clearly for Martin, we're not wanting to have it off and go back up on a Wednesday night either, but like, they've arrived, both teams are there, it wasn't playable. The Wick volunteers were working hard to get Harmsworth playable, and the referee Robert McKinnon, I think you'd have to say, he's handled it very well in terms of, he said at 2 o'clock it wasn't playable, but another hour of drying conditions and work going into it, it was playable for a 4 o'clock kick-off, and they've got the game played, and well done to them. I know it's a difficult one to everyone has different views on it, and if a pitch is unsafe, a referee will say a pitch is unsafe, and that's it. But I just think with that Keith Brechin one, with what's come out subsequently, you sort of feel like that game probably could have been played on Saturday.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting point Kevin Mackey, the Brechin chairman, made as well about we never talk about safety when pitches are rock hard when it's roasting hot in the summer. I thought
that is a point. I mean, you've seen it. The thing is, talk about like broken legs or like ligaments and things like that. You would generally say there's probably more chance of, say, knee ligaments going during the sort of summer months when pitches are hard. I mean, you see quite a lot of those sort of injuries in pre-season compared with maybe midwinter, but it's one of those things. In terms of
Wick against Formartine.
Wick against Formartine game, very impressive result for the Scorries. Gary Manson said it was their best result of the season. Game of two halves a little bit. I mean, wind was blowing down the hill from what I hear at Harmsworth Park, so I think Wick at half time were quite happy to still be in the game at 1-0, and then second half they've sort of gone for it a bit more and got their victory. It's interesting as well, like after at the halfway point of the season, 17 games, Academy picked up 13 points in the league, and they've played 6 matches since and they've picked up 10 points, which is very impressive. And it seems, I think I've said this previously, but it seems like with the sort of overhaul and rebuild they've had, things are starting to click now, and particularly at home on their day. I think they're showing, I mean, they drew with Brora last Wednesday as well, they're showing that they can cause teams problems. The other side of it for Martin, disappointing week or so for them, drawing with Lossy, losing in Inverurie in Aberdeenshire Cup, and then losing up at Wick, and Stuart Anderson sort of unhappy with the goals they're losing, feels they're losing pretty avoidable goals, and clearly if you're doing that it's going to be hard to win. Similar
to Brora for Martin, do you think just the league's kind of got out of reach, and maybe at that, maybe, I don't know, a little bit of focus, a little bit of edge, desires, maybe just dropped off a little tiny bit?
I wouldn't say that. I don't think so. I just think it's as simple as maybe it's just what Stuart's been saying about losing poor goals. I mean, his feeling on Saturday even as well was they were reasonably comfortable at 1-0, and then I think there's a bit of a mix-up between Johnny Crawford and Cameron Middleton for Wick's equaliser, and then that probably, gives Wick a bit of impetus as well. So it's just, I don't think it's a desire thing or anything like that, because probably up until last Saturday I would have said they were very much still in the title race. Now, I mean, they're 9 points behind Brechin, having played same number of games, but now it probably does, with the form they've shown in the last week, it probably does look like an uphill battle that they'd struggle to win. But I still think in the league, you would say they still have quite a lot to play for in terms of whether it's second, third, fourth, whatever.
Okay, just to clarify, the goals in that game for Martin were ahead via Lewis Duncan's free kick. Kyle Henderson then capitalised on a defensive mix-up to equalise for Wick. He then teed up Jack Halliday to make it 2-1, and it was Henderson again who set up Mark McCaddy to make it 3-1. So a good day for Kyle Henderson. That one, Devonville 2, Rothes 2. This was an interesting game in the way it was described. It sounded like Vale maybe had a lot of the ball in the opening period, couldn't get past Sean McCarthy in the Rothes goal. They then find themselves 2-0 get down when they probably felt they shouldn't be, via Kenzie Shepherd and a Jaden Bradford own goal. Second half, Jack Mitchell and Innes Mackay level it, but then it sounded like Vale, but for Sean McIntosh, might have lost the game late on because through a Jake Thompson goal, but Sean McIntosh managed to prevent that. It's kind of one of those that I look at and think as learnings for both sets of players, because from a Devon Vale perspective, you're like, well, if they've taken their chances early on, they maybe win that game because they get themselves in front. But Rothes, you're like, you're 2-0 up.
Aye,
hold on.
I think the thing is, it's like one of those classic games where neither side's happy at the end. Like, as you're touching on, Vale could have been in front before they were behind, then they've come back, and you think maybe at 2-2 with sort of quarter an hour left they could go on and win it. They haven't done. Rothes from 2-0 up, Richard Hastings would have been hoping they could have gone on and found a way to win that game. I mean, the thing that's not helping Roth is obviously like you look at Saturday again, no Michael Finnis, no Fraser Robertson, no Ben Williamson, Greg Morrison, Alan McKenzie, Kyle White, Duncan Proudfoot, a lot of good players to be missing. But at the same time, although they had certainly some younger lads on the bench and there was 3 or 4 in the 11, they still had, to me, a decent starting 11. And I thought once they got 2-0 up, with the experience they did have within that, with the likes of Brucey Milne and others, and Gary Kern, players like that, I thought they might have been able to see that one through. But obviously not to be. I mean, for Devon Vale, it's like it's just that. I mean, said it all season. No Dane Ballard, but you're left thinking a wee bit again. It's like at 0-0 when they've had chances. If they have a sort of 20-goal a season striker on the pitch, is it a different outcome?
Yeah, I mean, they just don't score that many goals. They're not the worst, but they don't score that many goals. Right, let's move on though. Nairn County 1, Clattenacudden 1. Now, where we're going to have
to get through here.
Where we're going to have to start with this one before we get on to the football, which is interesting in and of itself, of course. Steve Mackay, the Nairn manager, was left raging. Fraser Dingwall, Nairn captain, isn't he? He was sent off late in the first half, and Ross Tokley joined him in taking an early bath quite late on, second yellow card.
It's a late bath.
Well, yeah, late bath. Steve Mackay, to just cherry pick a bit of his post-match reaction, he said the Highland League and the authorities need to look at it and make sure we're bringing in the correct standard of official. I'm so frustrated by it. We had a great crowd, 2 teams battling hard trying to get a victory, but it's all about the officials. Sid suggesting that the day hadn't been about the 2 teams in the football in the end because of refereeing decisions. What's your take on
that? I think his general point about the Highland League and the SFA and the standard of officials, I think it's one of these things, like there's a sort of scarcity of officials as it is, and I mean they're doing their best. I mean, Saturday, going through it, there is quite a bit of controversy in there. I do think like Ross Tokley's sending off's interesting because Stephen felt his second booking was maybe on the harsh side. Having watched it, I can understand why he's been booked. Like he wins a header, but there is quite a lot of contact in the air. The interesting thing with that as well is Ross Tokley had been booked in the first half, and then second half he gave away the penalty which Clark scored from with a sort of sliding challenge, which was one of them where I felt if he hadn't been booked already, he probably would have been, like he maybe could have had a second booking there. But it's easy to argue about that. But I can see, I mean, once upon a time, you go back 10-15 years when Ross Tokley was playing in the Premiership, probably wouldn't have been a foul. But now with the way the game is, I think I can see why the referee Owen Lawrence is given that. The Fraser Dingwall red card's interesting for a couple of reasons, because in the build-up from the footage I've seen, it's impossible to tell, but Nairn were adamant the ball was out, but the game kept going. So that was one thing. Also linked to that was there was a sort of block on Lewis McKenzie, on Kenny McKenzie, off the ball in that same sort of passage of play, which could probably have been a Nairn free kick potentially as well. Then when you come down to it, you can debate whether it is a clear goal scoring opportunity with Fraser Dingwall fouling Bunce, because Matthew Strachan is coming round in the cover. But I can see why Owen Lawrence has deemed it is, because if Bunce stayed on his feet, whether he would have scored for the angle, you can debate, but he was probably getting a shot away. But what's interesting for me about that is, and I've watched it, is there is potentially a case for it. It was given as a free kick on the edge of the box and then a red card. There is potentially a case for it. I think the contact could be on the line, in which case it's probably a penalty, and then with a double jeopardy a yellow. But that's very touch and go, and I mean Owen Lawrence only had one look at it, so it's obviously a difficult call. But you have all that, and it does probably detract for the game a wee bit, because nobody wants to be sitting here talking about decisions, but it's a hard. I can understand Stephen Mackay's frustration, but it's a hard one in terms of, you know, what you do about it. I mean, some of the like I've touched on some of the calls I can understand a wee bit as well. They're marginal decisions, but clearly it has had a big, losing Fraser Dingwall in the first half has had quite a big bearing on the game from an Nairn perspective.
As Callum said, Ross totally gave away a second half penalty, which Connor Bunce scored to open the scoring for Clack. Ben Barron then scored an equalising pen for Nairn. I think it was Andrew McLeod that was fouled inside the area.
I mean, it's a better, at the end of the day, it's probably a better point for Nairn than it is for Clack, all things considered. But given the playing with 10 men for as long as it did and then losing another one late on, but it seems like that's almost a side issue a wee bit, just because of all the decisions that have been in the game. I
did think if you'd looked at that game beforehand, I know how the game plays out has a bearing on this, but for Clack, the way Clack's season had been going before Conor Gethins came in, to get that 1-1 draw, I was surprised at how unhappy he seemed to be after the game, and it kind of shows the standards he'll drive at Clack. But talking about them relying on one or two players to do something outrageous, and the sort of team generally having no guile, no cuteness, no imagination, I did think that was quite strong.
It was strong words, but I wasn't really surprised by that, because I think when Clack were playing against 10 and they'd got themselves in front, you would want to go on and win that game. And I think Connor probably, and from the match footage I've seen, I would probably agree that Connor felt they didn't do enough in the final third in terms of creating chances, and when you're playing against 10 men, that's clearly a big frustration.
Okay, one more game to discuss then. Inverary Locos 1, Lossiemouth 1. Sounded very much like a classic Highland League weekly tale, this, of Locos being made to pay for first half profligacy. Dean Donaldson said 10 chances they had before Brandon Hutchison put Lossie in front after the break. Locos hadn't conceded for 445 minutes before that, which I see on Twitter or X is their record since becoming a senior club. Miles Gaffney scored a deflected goal to...
It's definitely James Leslie's own goal.
Is it James Leslie's own goal?
An own goal.
Okay, well,
he's not getting that.
1-1 in the end though. Spoils shared. Given they progressed in the Aberdeenshire Cup in the middle of the week, do you still come away? I know Locos will want to win every league game, but we said last week they got themselves up to 10th spot. They've been going well. They got through in the Aberdeenshire Cup, which probably had become aim-y. It still feels like it's been a decent week for Locos.
Yeah, I think what it shows, and Dean Donaldson's been at pains probably to say this during their recent good run as well, is that they're still not the finished article in Inverurie, and sort of, you know, a long way from where they would want to be. But it also shows that, for me, the strength right down the table, really, and in terms of on any given day, the problems aside, can cause you, like Lossie are always hard working, well organised, and could, with the players they've got, compose a threat. They scored a really good goal through Brandon Hutchison. And I mean, you look at their recent games, they've drawn with Locos away from home, drawn with Martin away from home, narrowly beaten at Brora when they probably should have taken something out of that game. So they've shown they're capable. The only frustration probably for Frank McGettrick again is, like the Martin game last week, they got themselves in front and they weren't able to either build on that or hold on to the lead, and the goal that they did concede they'll be frustrated with, because there was opportunities to stop it, and even the way it ends up in the net, I think James Leslie sort of slips and sends it in. Like he'll probably be a bit frustrated with that as well. But it just, you know what I mean, it just shows like week to week there's no easy games.
Yeah. Alright then, well that's all of Saturday's and Friday's results rounded up. So let's have a look at the Breedon Highland League table as it is now. Okay, competition time. The first order of business is to clear up who won last week's Highland League weekly mug comp. The winner was Richard Openshaw, so congratulations Richard. Have you won a mug in the past? Not sure.
Potentially.
What Richard correctly answered was the nationality of former Inverurie Locos forward Tam Tam Tran. Vietnamese was the correct answer, so congratulations Richard once again. sport@pressandjournal.co.uk with your address please, and we'll get that mug sent out to you. This week, for your chance to win a mug, please tell us when the last time Fraserburgh were defeated at Dudgeon Park was. What we're looking for, the year?
Month and the year, I would say.
Month and the year, Callum says. So answers to sport@pressandjournal.co.uk to be in with a chance of winning. That's it for this week's edition of Highland League Weekly. Thank you for watching. Thank you to Callum for being here. If you've enjoyed the show, there's plenty more to come in the weeks ahead. More highlights, more features, and more analysis from us, if you can call it that. Until we see you next, please sign up to our Highland League newsletters. There's a link to do that below this video. That'll get all the latest Highland League news from the Press and Journal straight into your email inbox every week. Until we see you next as well, please follow us or join our various social media communities. We're on Twitter, now known as X. We've got a Facebook group, on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube as well. But yes, next time we see you will be Monday, so please tune in for next week's Highland League Weekly and enjoy the football, whichever games you're watching between now and then.